This is the Guided Podcast, an interview with the fly fishing industry's top guides and brand ambassadors. On this podcast, we cover topics such as the guiding lifestyle, conservation, different fisheries globally, and gear and technology to improve your game. I'm your show host, Greg Keenan. Before we begin today's show, let's thank our sponsors. Scientific Anglers is the leader in producing the world's best fly lines for over 75 years. Scientific Anglers have set new industry standards with their SA Amplitude family of fly lines, both in technology and performance. See the difference for yourself today at scientificanglers.com. Show your show support and follow us on Instagram at Fly Fishing Insider Podcast. Now let's begin. Welcome to Guided. Today our guest is Josh Hutchins. Josh, all the way from Australia. How you doing?
G'day, Greg. Good morning from Australia.
It is morning and it's afternoon, evening here, so that's funny. Hey, you know what? I'm glad you guys are on the show here for sure. A ton of stuff. For those that don't know who you are, tell us a bit about yourself and what you're doing out in Australia.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the show. And so I guess for everyone right now, it's a little bit of a funny scenario, but I'm not going to focus on the obvious. We essentially, Aussie fly fisher is our business. And if we sort of cut that into three different things, we run a guide business over here. We take people fly fishing regularly for trout, for Murray cod, which is our largest predator fish. It's they grow up to about 250 pounds. They eat big flies, top water flies. So it's a pretty exciting fish to chase. We run trips through the north of Australia for saltwater fly fishing. I guess the saltwater fly fishing in Australia isn't unknown to everyone, but it is sort of emerging internationally. And amazing permit fishing, GTs, marlin, queenfish. We've got some other fish like the blue bastard. Jako came out and did a film with us with that a couple of years ago. Tuskies, which are really hard fighting fish. It's a saltwater playground. It's really, really cool. So, we run trips there. We run trips around, particularly the Southern Hemisphere, the South Pacific, New Zealand, Argentina, Mongolia. We did go to Greenland last year. We did a group there. And then the other side, I guess, is media. So I do quite a lot of photography for different magazines and brands, and we make a few films too. So we keep pretty active, and everything's based around fly fishing, and we absolutely love it.
Man, is there anything you don't do? It sounds like you have quite the playground, like you say, out in Australia. That's fantastic. The Murray cod, like it's a top. You mentioned that it's a top water. Like you catch it on top water, is that correct? Yeah,
so I mean, definitely. So we're coming into winter now over here, and it's the time of the year when we might catch some like exceptional beats. One of our guides, Mickey, last year he got one that was, I guess, 4.5 foot long. But these are real tanky fish. Like a 4.5 foot long fish could have a girth of about 4 foot as well. And so that fish was probably 90 pounds, could be even pushing 100 pounds. It was a really fat fish. And I mean, it's hard to get a top size on that fish. They say that they've had one 250 pounds historically. Mm-hmm. But yeah, they're a big fish, and they'll eat. I mean, twice I've seen them eat a duck off the water, just completely obliterate it. It's sort of like that, much like a bass sound when they kind of eat off the top, that kind of cupping shotgun sort of sound. But it can be extremely loud, and you just see, large lizards or ducks, and people used to joke that don't let your small dog swim through the water or something. But yeah, they're fun to chase on fly. There's definitely people been doing that for 20, 30 years or so. But I would say in the last 5, 10 years, that's really taken off. People chasing them on fly and throwing big flies, probably similar to what people would throw for pike or muskie, things like that. And for us, the exciting thing is these fish can get into some really small streams at times. We do chase them in the bigger rivers, in the impoundments, the dams, but you could also be chasing these fish in a river that's the size of a trout stream and even smaller, and there could be a 50-pound fish just sitting in that little pool that will come and obliterate your fly. So we do fish subsurface for them as well, like big streamers, but obviously the top water stuff is pretty exciting, and we try and do that as much as possible.
Wow, what a cool man! Sounds like a cool fishery. I didn't know this existed. Like talking to you, I didn't actually think I would be talking about this. So when you're fishing for these fish, right, and they're obviously a freshwater fish, and you know they're in the river systems. Like, and you said that this has recently exploded in the past 5 years. What do you think it is? Because it's the fight, or like is it the take? Like, what do you think it is that's making this species explode, or this fishery explode, and you know, turn heads?
Oh yeah, I think it's quite a few things. Australia as a whole, with the fly fishing community, probably had either that sort of saltwater focus or trout focus as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
The Murray cod were never forgotten, and people did chase them. It just, I feel like we made a film called Gudu a few years back, and the idea of that was to basically display some of the things that people wouldn't have thought you'd see with cod, and that was sight fishing for them, just really sort of showing those topwater explosions, fishing some really small streams. And I think for a lot of fly fishermen, they just didn't want to fish that big water. Like a lot of Australians even would think that Murray cod is like a big water, dirty kind of water system, whereas we were sight fishing for these things in clear water, catching them on top water and that kind of thing. So definitely there's people that have gone before us and done a really good job at promoting the fish, but what we'd never seen was somebody market them in a way that was going to be really appealing to fly fishermen. You see these films on Golden Dorado and Arapaima and Cayman and these sort of things, and if you literally just showed people dredging for them and none of the exciting stuff, it's not going to be that appealing. So I guess for the Murray cod, we really tried to show the best ways that we like to catch them on top water and small water. And I think that's really helped. We've focused a lot around just fishing that small water and finding water that would be really appealing to fly fishermen. Definitely at the moment. So in the winter, we're going to go out and we're going to fish some of these really big dams that have extra big fish in them. And if I'm totally honest, it's a grind. There's nothing pretty to display about that style of fishing. It's you're throwing huge flies. The fish will come up into the shallows. You'll catch them in, let's say, 6 to 12 foot of water, but it's blind fishing. It's tough, but you do it because you know that prize could be a really, really big fish. In our film, we didn't so much work on that type of fishing. That's the sort of fishing that people know about Murray cod. It's go for a week and hope to catch one fish kind of stuff. Whereas, in those warmer months, throwing top water, throwing in these small little creeks and clear water river systems, it can be quite productive. You can catch 10, 20 fish a day and have some really explosive eats. It's cool stuff.
No doubt. Definitely sounds cool. I'm going to have to explore and learn more myself in that fishery. So, you like you said earlier, you're so spoiled in that playground. What do you prefer, saltwater or freshwater?
I really do like variety. I grew up doing pretty much solely freshwater. Where I grew up was just about, let's say, 3 hours west of Sydney. Mm-hmm. And out there, we've got Murray cod, we've got trout, and a few other sort of native perch species. So that was probably what I initially did for a long time. And then in recent years, especially the last 5-6 years, I've just got massively obsessed with saltwater. So if I have spare time and extended time to go and explore somewhere or try something different, I typically do go and look in the saltwater realms. I just love exploring new things, going new places. Australia has really cool saltwater. We have 2 Indo-Pacific permit species. We've got the blotchy, which you'd find in, let's say, the Seychelles and other places. We've also got a fish called a permit called an anak, A-N-A-K, Trachonitis anak, and that's a species that's endemic to Australia. And, they're considered a really tough permit to catch. They grow quite big. So that's an awesome fish to catch here. We've got the blue bastard, which has sort of been brought a little bit more to fame with some recent films as well. We've got another fish called a black spot tusk fish. So we did a film for the fly fishing film tour this year. We've got the tusk in there, and that's a fish that'll absolutely obliterate you on the flats. You hook that thing and it's going to the coral immediately. I kind of say it's like a trigger fish times 10 in power. It's a really strong little nugget of a fish, and it's a beautiful fish. It's bright blue. And then, we've got all the other things people know about too, like giant trevally, tuna, queenfish. Barramundi is another fish in Australia that's very iconic. Yeah. Definitely, in the north of Australia, nobody can visit without wanting to catch a barramundi. That's, quite often there's this bit of an argument between the southern people and the northern people is barramundi or Murray cod the iconic fish of Australia? And because I should say Murray cod are particularly in the bottom half of Australia, and barramundi are in the top half. So barramundi, they're a fish that does switch between the salt and fresh water, and really cool fish to catch. Amazing sport fish. They hit hard. They definitely fight a lot better than a Murray cod. A Murray cod is more about, that big hit, that initial big pull, and just a large, impressive fish. Whereas a barramundi will fight harder for longer in general, and they jump like crazy too. So it's a bit like our golden dorado, if you will, or something like that. But barra will get really big as well. They'll eat top water. So from the species side of things, there really is an endless list. It's a great playground for fly fishermen in the salt, that's for sure.
So the barramundi, are they like are they toothy? Do they have like teeth? It's
a bit more rusty. It's no. So it's probably I've only caught smaller snook in Florida, but I imagine as they get bigger, they get really raspy in the mouth. It's not going to cut your hand, but they're just really raspy. And that kind of bucket mouth that you'd get on a bass or something like that too.
Interesting. Okay.
Murray cod, on the other hand, will really tear your hand to pieces. It's not teeth, but it's really sharp platelets in their mouth. A fish that's, say, 2 foot long isn't so bad. Mm-hmm. If you let it twist up your hand, it's still going to cut it. But a fish that's 3 or 4 foot long, if you put your hand in there and it manages to twist it out, it can very easily cut you to the bone. There's kind of this respect thing that you have cod thumb or cod hand. Like if someone wears a glove, you're not going to get that. But people kind of say if you catch a big fish, you got to put your bare hand in there because that's the respect thing to the fish.
Only in Australia they say that. That's funny.
Yeah,
that's funny. So, let's look at the fishery. Let's look at your saltwater fishery, and let's look at the barramundi particularly. Walk me through that. I'm just trying to picture what weight rods are you using? What's your setup? I'm a client. I'm here, Josh. Put me on some barramundi. You said I had to catch one of these before I leave the country. Walk me through how you're gonna put me on those fish.
Yeah, for sure. So, a lot of barra places, if it's in the fresh water and it's in an impoundment, we can typically eliminate crocodiles from the equation. I guess we can add that slight death element in there.
So, wait a second.
We are fishing around,
I'm waiting and there's crocodiles around me?
No. So, Australian crocodiles, you will never, you don't want to push your luck on that, particularly in barramundi areas, which are going to be, there are some really clear water scenarios, but it's mostly going to have a little bit of colour in the water. So if you're in an impoundment, let's say in our state Queensland or something like that, if that's, I won't go too far into it, but basically if the crocs and the barra will come up the river, people often say if you find barra, you will find crocs. And so a lot of those barra areas, you've got to be really careful where you wade. Essentially, it's best to not wade at all. So typically, you're going to be fishing from a boat, unless you're in a very high altitude lake where they've put barramundi in there. You can pretty much guarantee there's going to be no crocs. But essentially Northern Territory, Northern Western Australia, and Northern Queensland, when you find barra in a river or the ocean estuary system, you can assume there could be crocs around, so you're going to be very careful. So I just put in that little disclaimer at the start there. But in terms of fishing, a 9 or 10 weight, 9-foot rod is probably going to be our likely choice. I really like to fish that Titan series from SA, the tropical Titan there. So it's a good one for turning over big flies and just getting lots of quick, repetitive casts out because, we're going to be hitting that bank. We're going to be hitting the snags, any overhanging trees, fallen logs, any areas where, we get what we call like a barra drain. So these little snaky drains that go down through the mud flats. When the tide drops, the barra will sit in those drains. Mm-hmm. You're just going to be, they're the sort of fish that you're going to cast that big fly or that popper, you're going to let it sit for a moment. And then the retrieve is typically quite pausey. You're going to strip, pause it for a bit, strip, pause it for a bit, strip, pause, strip, pause. And they are that kind of fish that really likes to eat it on the pause. And some days they're just going to eat it and go with it, done deal. But the amount of times they just eat that, and before your eyes, in a millisecond, they've released the fly straight away too. So they are that kind of fish that can, unless they're eating it on the run and turning, they can really eat it and spit it straight away. The moment that fish eats, you're going to strip strike as hard as you can. They've got a nice big bony mouth, and hopefully all hell will break loose after that. They're just going to be jumping and they'll take off. And probably that, I'd say 30 to 50 pound fish, which is going to be, let's say, 3 foot to 4 foot. I know you're Canadian. I should speak in centimeters here, but then I'm trying to
pounds
go across
work
the board
good for
too.
me. No, that works.
Yep. But so that sort of fish is, that's your really strong fish. That's just going to pull hard. It's going to jump lots. As I say, they've got a raspy mouth, so they can wear through a leader over time. The sharp part that often cuts the leader is just behind their gill plate. There's a really sharp line there. And because they do a lot of jumping, let's say like a tarpon, if that even just touches the line for a second, it'll cut it through. So we do often fish a bit of bite leader at the end. You might have, you might have even 40 pounds leader running from the fly line, but then you could have, like guys might fish 60, 80 or even 100 pound bite tippet at the end, which might just be a foot of leader till they attach the fly, particularly if they're going for really big barramundi. So that's probably your setup there. And, I've found barramundi out on the flats before. We're up in the Western Islands last year and we came to the edge of the flat and there was just this big ball of yellowy silver fish. And I mean, mentally, we weren't thinking barra. We're thinking, wow, is that a really big school of permit that are just sitting really tight in the ball? So we threw a crab in there and straight away this barra eats it and sort of just jumps and throws the fly. But we're like, oh my gosh, it's barramundi. And so we just managed to have like 2 hours straight of catching these barra that were on the flats that just every single cast, I kid you not, when the fly went in, they'd eat it. Eat it, you'd catch it, you'd lose it. Something would happen every cast. Wow. And to find barramundi out on really shallow, clear flats like that isn't always the norm. So it's pretty special. Normally you're hitting those mangrove systems or the river systems or around, fallen timber or something in the lakes like that. So it's an exciting fish to chase. Definitely an icon of Australian sports fishing.
It sounds like it. I'm blown away. I want to try it minus the crocodiles. But Josh, I want to ask you. You got lots going on and whatnot. What's next for you? You mentioned you got a movie or you just shot a film for the film fest here. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah. So typically we try and make, I guess, a bigger film every year that we could run in the film festival. We're always making a bunch of little films trying to promote places and things too. But so the film we just did that's currently still going, I guess it's a little bit on hold with COVID, but I went over to the US in January for the launch of that, and it's called Down Under. So we did a road trip from Tasmania, which is our very southern state. Australia as a whole, I guess we would say the mainland, and then Tasmania is the little one down the bottom that's disconnected by the ocean. But so we started there. We caught trout in Tasmania. It's a beautiful place to catch wild brown trout. Then we made our way back to the mainland. We made our way up the coast, and essentially we just followed the east coast. So in Sydney Harbour, it's Australia's biggest city, most iconic city. You've got the big harbour bridge there. You've got the Opera House, beautiful harbour. We were catching yellowtail kingfish. So it's a really cool, hard-fighting fish as well. We made our way up there. Then we caught Murray cod in an area that we call New England. I think every country has a New England. Then from there, we kept making our way up. So we went to a place called Gladstone where we caught some golden trevally, some queenfish. We were frustrated by some big permit and basically just continued our way up. The next stop from there, we caught some tuskfish. So blue bastards are really popular, but we also have grey bastards and brown bastards. So we caught some of those in that spot as well. We caught some tuna, then making our way up from there. We actually, it was the one part of the trip where we didn't kind of road trip it. We jumped on a mothership, and that was just insane. We were catching GTs on the flats, permits, blue bastards, all sorts of things. It's an absolute wonderland of fishing on the Great Barrier Reef as you head up into far north Queensland. From there, we crossed over to the other side of Cape York, which if you look at a map of Australia, on the far north east side, it's kind of got this big pointy cape, Cape York. Yeah. And then we finished off the trip with some barramundi. So it was a bit of an epic sort of road trip to capture, I guess, I can't count off the top of my head right now, but about 8 or 9 different iconic species of Australia and what you could expect at a real quick snapshot of doing a road trip in Australia. And I mean, to be honest, because we were filming and we were on a timeline and we had to get things done, doing that trip inspired myself to just want to do it again and spend more time because there was so much cool stuff we saw. And quite often when the fishing was on, we just had to be like, all right, our 2-3 days is up for this spot. We need to keep moving to finish the film. That was good fun. And I think, you know, at the moment, I definitely thinking, what can we film next? What would we like to do? We've just spent a little bit of time working on a few drift boat options for our trout fishing. We've been doing that the last couple of years. Yeah. You know, Australia is a really diverse country, and in the same way that in the US, I guess everything's back to front with the hemispheres. But you know, in the US, it's pretty much always warm in the south, and it can be quite cold in the north. Whereas here, it's just the opposite. So the south, we have those beautiful summers, but it's pretty cold there in the winter. And in the north, I always say it's typically always hot. It's just the humidity ranges. So, it's winter for us right now. So, I mean, what's coming next would be, at the moment, we're focusing on our trout and our Murray cod because that's what's immediately local. And we're still a little bit limited with how far we can travel. So, we've had really good trout fishing. You know, I took some guys fishing yesterday and we were catching big rainbows. Typically this time of year in our lakes, it's a good time to catch sort of 4 to 8 pound rainbows, and it's all sight fishing. So it's actually really good fishing. And then our Murray cod stuff, we're going to start to do a bit more of in the lakes as well, try and catch some big fish. But as soon as they reopen the States, we're going to head north again and fish for some saltwater stuff and do a bit more exploring and check out some new things. And yeah, I'd love to make I sort of haven't totally decided what we'll do, but we're going to work on a new film as soon as we can.
Awesome. Sounds like you got lots going on. Definitely from the sounds of it. I mean, I know I'm sitting there thinking about that road trip still, and I would love to have been on that road trip. That's for sure. Did you ever redo it? You said you wanted to redo it. Did you ever redo it, or are you still planning to redo it?
Yeah, I guess we're planning to redo it. We'll at least do half of it once they reopen the north of Australia. Particularly some of those flats and places we went that we just had a small amount of time to spend for the film. We'd love to just go and spend a lot more time there and enjoy.
Hit it.
No rush, you know, no agenda.
Yeah. Oh, the way life should be sometimes.
We were pretty lucky with the film. Yeah, we were pretty lucky for the film though, because we'd set our sights on a lot of species. So like I said, it was trout, yellowtail kingfish, Murray cod, 2 species of ennet, GT, blue bastard, golden trevally, queenfish, barramundi, and tuna. And the only one of those that we didn't manage to catch was the Anik permit. So in terms of setting our sights on trying to align tides, weather, people's availability, all this kind of thing, we felt pretty lucky that we ticked off pretty much everything bar one fish for a small amount of time. It worked in our favour.
No, definitely. Yeah, it doesn't always work in your favor, that's for sure. So, no, I hear you. You know, Josh,
yeah,
I want
you bring a camera and things get hard.
Yeah, it's exactly how it goes. It's always how it goes. So, I probably would get shot if I didn't. Get shot, but you know what I mean. Get in trouble here if I didn't mention about the blue bastard, because Jako. When I talked to him about this as well, and I know you really helped facilitate that and kind of put Australia a bit more, you shine some light on the fishery in Australia. And if you could, just like touch base on the blue bastard for just a few minutes, just to, again, share that with us.
For sure. Yeah. So the blue bastard is another endemic fish to Australia, and just a really cool fish with it. It's got cool attitude. It's a good looking fish. They fight hard. So the years are a little bit of a mismatch at the moment. I think that was around 2 years ago. I invited Jako out. So I'd fished with Jako in Mongolia before. He guided there for quite a long time, and we ran a few trips over there. And I believe just on the boat one day I was saying to Jako in Mongolia, we've got this new spot and we're starting to run trips there. I think it'd be a cool place to do a film. You can catch 2 species of permit. There's also fish like a blue bastard. His response was like everyone's response at that stage was like, what on earth is a blue bastard? And so I kind of explained that, and I guess it just kind of grew from there. We invited Keith Rosinas out from the Seychelles as well, and Christian Pretorius, their buddy. So, and then we had a few Aussies as well. So we just sort of put this trip together where the mothership that we use up there in the north of Australia set aside a week where we could just fish and film, and we had some pretty glamour weather and got out there. And the blue bastards were definitely the focus of that trip as much as the permit were. And a lot of these places you'll find the permit, the blue bastards, and the tuskies as well are going to be hanging in similar areas. Typically permit like that pure sand scenario, the blue bastards will tend to hang a little bit more towards the edge of the flat where there's a bit more rock and rubble. I guess they get their name because, I'm convinced like permit have amazing eyes, right? Like you make a cast on the flat, they're a real jittery fish. They're like paranoid. They're looking over their shoulder and something's not right and they're just gone.
Yeah.
Blue bastards are a little bit different. They're like, permit are quite often moving, whereas blue bastards will often sit in the one spot and they're just kind of milling around. They're just sort of feeding, looking for crabs or shrimp or whatever in the flats. And then they'll sort of, just unannounced rush over to another little spot and look and bury their head in the sand there. And I guess they got that name because they're just a bit of a bastard. You'll make a cast, you think they're going that way, and then they'll immediately turn the other way. You make another cast, you think they're going that way, and they'll immediately turn the other way. The other thing with the blue bastard, I'm not sure what it is about their eyes. I think it works in a different way than permit, let's say, because quite often unless that fly really sinks right down into their vision, they just don't see it. Whereas a permit, I think, can see a fly from a long way away at times, even though they can choose not to engage with it. So I guess with a blue bastard, it's just that tricky factor that they're always switching that opposite direction than where you predict they might go. They're not such a predictable fish. And, when you're typically going to make that cast, you're going to let it sink to the bottom and you're going to, feed them the fly and try and entice them to eat it. Sometimes they'll just come straight over and hop on it. Other times they'll follow it the whole way to the boat. You're stopping, starting, and they'll sort of stand on their head and tail out of the water if it's shallow enough when they eat that fly. And then they're that kind of fish. So I always say a blue bastard will give you 1 or 2 seconds to sort yourself out. They're going to thrash their head around once they eat the fly for a good second or two. And then, but if you haven't sorted yourself out in that second or two, you're going straight to the rocks. That's where they're heading. They're going to try and wrap you around stuff. Tuskies, on the other hand, they don't give you a moment. They eat the fly and they're going to the rocks. So they're both really hard fighting fish. Yeah, you've just got to keep them out of those rocks once you hook up. Typically, we're still fishing. I'd say 20 pound is the norm, leader wise, that we're fishing for blue bastards. Sometimes it might be 16 pound, but 20 is normally what you'll get away with. And yeah, it's interesting for the different places I've fished for them. So Exmouth on the far west coast of Australia, I've actually not got a blue bastard there. I've fished for quite a few, and they were. At the time I knew a lot less about them when I was there, but they were kind of tricky sort of fish. In the Wessel Islands where we made that film with Jako, those fish have just seen next to nobody, and they're actually quite attainable. You can catch quite a few in a day, and it's an incredible fishery there. And then up on the east coast, on East Cape York, that trip we did during our film last year, those fish there were there were some exceptional beasts. One of the guys on the trip got one that I'd say is the largest blue bastard I've ever seen. It was a really, really big fish, and they were funny fish. You had to just constantly put the fly in front of them. They didn't spook, they didn't interact. But just eventually one of them would come over and eat the fly. They were really strange behaviour at times, those fish. So different spots, I have noticed slightly different behaviour from them and their willingness to eat and even size variety. There's some places that are, let's say Weeper is another place on the west side of Cape York where in Northern Australia there where you can catch quite a few blue bastards. As a whole, I'd say they're probably not as big as, say, the Wessels or East Cape York, but they're still a really cool fish to catch there. And, so it's a fish that you can catch across that top half of Australia, I would say, or particularly the top third coastline of Australia is where you're going to find blue bastards, and definitely one for any travelling angler to add to their list.
I agree. Any angler should add that to their list for sure. Definitely be on the bucket list. One of the things you mentioned, though, really quickly was use a 20-pound leader. Now, is that just a straight leader that you're using, or do you have do you rig up your own leader? Do you have a leader system that you can share with us for that fish to successfully make sure that it doesn't cut you off?
Yeah, for sure. I typically fish, fluoro on everything on the flats. The new Absolute Fluoro that Scientific Angler have done, I really like how they've gone with the bigger spools, particularly for the bigger leaders as well. I like that. I can attach it to my bag. It's easy to kind of stow away there. On a simple leader presentation, I would probably go, let's say, I could go in thirds or halves. I'll either go, let's say, a 9-10 foot leader, and half of that I'm going to be 40 pound. The other half's going to be 20. I'll just attach those together. Typically, I do a double uni or maybe just a surgeon's knot. Or if I feel like I have a bit of time, I might go third. So I'll go a section, let's say a 3 foot section, 4 foot section of 40 pound, and then the same amount of 30 pound, and then I'll go down to 20 pound. And I know a lot of guys like to tie blood knots to kind of join those sections. I usually just go a double uni, and I've never had any issues with that. Every now and then I feel lucky, and I've received, or I buy a ready-made 20-pound tapered leader or something like that. But most of the time I just make it up with straight sections of leader and make my own leader up on the flat it takes.
Josh, before I let you go, I want to ask you, what else is there that us listeners should learn or know about Australia and the fishery there? Is there anything that you want to point out that people that are going there should be aware of, or people that are looking into possibly fishing this fishery? What's a highlight? What's something that you think we should know?
Yeah, for sure. I guess I would say that Australia is a really big country. There's a lot of things to do. Fishing the right seasons is obviously important, and it's going to get you the best results. So, very quickly, I'd say if someone's coming out, please just send us an email, send us a message through our Instagram or something like that. And we'd happily help people out. If they're coming at a particular time, we can direct them to what the best fishery is for that time. And, we've definitely got lots of different options, as I say, from the south of Australia with great trouts and Murray cod and even Sydney Harbour. Plenty of people come on a holiday to Sydney, and they can get out on a boat for the day there and catch some kingfish under the harbour bridge. So I would just sort of say, don't, unless you want to come for 3 or 4 months, don't expect to catch everything. But set your sights on either a species and come at the time that might be best for them, or set your sights on the time you want to come and just go with the flow. And we'd happily direct people towards what the best season is, what the best thing is to be catching at that time when they're here. As I say, coming into winter now, particularly a lot of our trout and Murray cod, we don't do as much guiding in the winter for those. But we start to do a lot more trips up north. So it's coming into the dry season for Northern Australia, and that means we're going to have clearer skies and we're going to do a lot more flats fishing and that kind of thing. So over the summer, we can have some incredible fishing up there as well. It's really hot. It can be quite humid. I guess the only unpredictable thing is it can be in the wet season. Well, it is in the wet season too. So you could have cloudy, rainy days. So certainly if you're coming a long way, we try and align people for the best fishery to be on at that time. And as I say, there's so much to do at any point of the year. There's great fishing if people are open-minded to catch different fish. So the best thing they can do is just reach out to us. They can just jump on our website if they want, aussieflyfisher.com, and send us an email and we can get them sorted with some great fishing. Perfect.
Can you say that website again as well as your Instagram handle?
Yeah, so our Instagram handle is just Aussie Fly Fisher. So the AUSSIE version, not OZ. And on our website, it's just aussieflyfisher.com.
Perfect. Josh, I definitely want to thank you for teaching me a lot about the fishery in Australia and whatnot, as well as I want to thank the listeners. So thank you guys.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
No worries. You've been listening to the Guided Podcast, sponsored by Scientific Anglers. If you like this podcast episode, please let us know and leave a review on your favorite podcast listening platform. And remember, subscribe to the Fly Fishing Insider podcast to get even more episodes of both Guided and the Fly Fishing Insider each week. See more at flyfishinginsiderpodcast.com.